Hello, welcome. It's Tuesday. It's Transformation Tuesday. Not at our normal time, I will admit. It's very overcast here and it's been rainy for the past day. And so this is the clearest part of the day. So I'm thinking that this is going to be the best time so we don't have internet issues and we can get through this without having lots of pausing and internet reconnection. So if that happens, just hang with me. I'm going to be here waiting for it to reconnect. So when you jump on live, if this is your first time joining me, thank you for joining me. Welcome. I am so glad that you are here. If you would introduce yourself in the comments, I'd love to meet you. I'm Stephanie Joyer. If this is not your first time here, then I will just quickly remind you that anything that I say or we talk about here, I have 3 emojis that just light me up and just hit all the spots. It's the white heart. Just makes me feel warm, safe, cuddly, cozy, all the good feelings inside. The fire flame just lets me know that something is resonating with you. You get it, you understand, you're on board with it. And then the glitter, just all the sparkly things, all the best feelings, all the warm heart, just like on fire is the glitter for me. So if anything at any time resonates with you, please feel free to drop those emojis down so I know that it is. Please say hi when you are here. And I will say hi back and let's get started. Okay, so today I want to talk about boundaries versus emotions versus feelings and how they are not the same thing. But first, I actually want to recap. I have my little list so I don't forget. So Transformation Tuesday, what is it? For those of you who are joining brand new. What is Transformation Tuesday? It's where we talk about all the parts of life that are transformational and what happens and what they are, identifying them, such as dreams. We've talked about dreams. We've talked about prayers. We've talked about transformational moments where you know that you will never be the same again and where you don't at the moment understand the ripple effect of that moment, but in hindsight you see it. We've talked about remembering those transformational moments after they've happened, leaning into them, asking for more, asking to receive more transformational moments. We've talked about wisdom. We've talked about freedom. And we've talked about emotional changes in an instant. How to emotionally change in an instant. And it kind of segues into our conversation today about boundaries versus feelings. And so I want to kind of give some shape to both of those words. I'm a big believer in giving context and definitions so that we know what we're actually describing when we say a word like boundary. What does that mean? What is my definition of boundary? What is your definition of boundary? Do they match? If they don't, we need to clarify that in the beginning so we understand what we talk about and we have a better chance of communicating. Same thing with feelings. Feelings are pretty obvious. The feeling that you have at any given moment, whether it's an emotional feeling or a physical feeling, if that's a feeling, but a boundary. So here's what I'm going to be picturing and meaning and intending when I say boundary. So boundary is going to be that which keeps something in and that which keeps something out. It acts as a barrier. It is constant. It does not change. It does not move. And to realize that there are already boundaries around us that we do not get to set, but when we come up against those boundaries, negative things happen. So let me give you an example of a boundary. A gate, a fence is a boundary. It is designed to keep that which you want inside, and it's also designed to keep that which you don't want out. Okay, so that's kind of a different one. Technically, you get to set a fence boundary if it's around a property. Then that boundary is already set, and when you cross that boundary, there can be consequences of crossing that boundary. Boundaries are set, they're firm, they're in place. And you have to realize that when you cross the boundary, there can be, and oftentimes are, consequences to crossing the boundary. You have boundaries. Other people have boundaries. And then there are boundaries in place that we don't get to decide and we don't get to set. Let me give you another example. Gravity. Gravity is a law. It is a boundary. You or I, just as our own person goes up against the law of gravity, we lose, right? That's something that we cannot change, and it is something that we live within. When you understand it, you can work with it to do something better. So if you understand physics and the law of lift, obviously you can fly, but you're not changing the boundary. You're not changing the law. You are working within it, and you are maintaining, you're using your understanding of gravity so that you can continue to fly. You're working with it, and you're respecting it at all times, or else planes wouldn't be able to fly. So that's what I mean. Those are some examples of boundaries. Okay, let's talk about feelings and how feelings are not boundaries, but they are indicators. Feelings are, let's talk, yeah. Okay, so feelings are what they are, emotional or physical. They are there. They exist. They exist for a purpose. They exist for a reason. And here's where feelings are kind of where we are with feelings. My personal opinion is that there is a small group of people who understand what I just said about feelings. They're indicators. They exist for a reason. They're there to help us understand what's going on around us, and that they can be processed. And they're there to help guide us to make decisions and to help give us an idea of what's going on around us, right? But they are not the boundary. People who understand that feelings change and feelings are indicators usually have an idea of how they can work through them themselves. There's a small group of people, I believe, that know how to do that. Most people realize that their feelings are valid and real, but haven't been taught how to process those, how to take those as indicators as what's going on around them, and then work through it and make decisions and behaviors appropriately. I believe that's where we are in our society with feelings. And then you have people who feelings get pushed under the rug, they get ignored, they get justified, they get shamed, they get condemned, they get pushed aside, coupled with not knowing or not having a skill set of being able to process those feelings. So it takes a combination of, there's two things to understand. It's a combination of understanding and respecting a boundary, knowing where it is and what it is and why it exists. Boundaries exist for a purpose and a reason. Understanding what the purpose and the reason is helps you navigate life. It's the same thing with the feeling. Understanding the purpose and the reason of a feeling as an indicator of where you or somebody else is with respect to that boundary. That's what a feeling is. Feeling is not boundary. Feeling is an indicator of where you or somebody else is in regards to the boundary. They both exist. They both have a purpose. They both work together. Here's the boundary. Here's the feeling. The closer I get to the boundary, the crazier the feelings can get, right? Panic, fear, shame, anger, whatever. The farther back from the boundary I am, usually, the safer I feel. Same thing with the other person. If there's somebody way out here, you can see, way out here, I feel safe, I feel fine. The closer that person gets to the boundary, I can get whatever the situation is, happy, sad, frustrated, angry, fearful. The boundary exists. The feeling that goes on inside of the person is an indicator of where I am or where the other person is in relation to that boundary. There's one other piece of this that I feel brings all of this together with the feeling aspect, and that is experience, and that is wisdom. We've talked about wisdom before in previous Transformation Tuesdays. I'm going to use it in context here to help us understand feelings. So let me give you an example. If I'm feeling a positive feeling, something that I enjoy, if I'm having a good time, if I'm feeling good, okay, with experience, I will know how far I can take that. Let's use a real life example, one that probably most of us can relate to and understand. Let's use wine as a context of this. Okay, if I have a glass of wine and I'm relaxed, being relaxed is a good feeling, right? It's relaxing. We want to stay there. We can rest. It's enjoyable. It's pleasurable. We desire to be relaxed, okay? If I have a second glass of wine, now maybe I'm feeling a little more excited, a little more uninhibited, a little happier. Maybe I was having a bad day. I'm on my second glass of wine. I'm feeling good. Okay. If I have a third glass of wine, maybe I feel like I am on fire, right? I feel invincible. I feel amazing. The world is my oyster. I'm on top of it. Okay. You can carry this on, right? Maybe at 3 or 4 glasses, maybe you start to tip to the other side. Maybe you don't feel like the world is your oyster, that you're on top of it. You start to feel more sluggish. You start to feel tired and weighed down. It's harder for you to process what's going on around you. It's harder for you to speak. Okay, you've crossed a boundary there. Couple that with waking up the next morning. How do you feel the next morning? Are you hungover? Are you tired? Are you groggy? You've crossed a boundary, right? So while you're doing it, maybe that happens at like 2 glasses. This is obviously relative for other people, and you could always argue that you can raise your tolerance. But at some point, a boundary is crossed. Your body has a boundary of how much alcohol it can process without you having any negative feeling the next day. That's going to come with experience. So once you've crossed that boundary, right? This is what I'm not wanting you to say is like, if you're feeling good, go for it and run that baby in, because apparently somewhere there's going to be a boundary. That was just the easiest example I could think of how to have some wisdom and discernment, and that usually comes with experience. If I know that if I want to just feel relaxed and I'm going to be with friends, 1 glass of wine is where I'm relaxed and that's where I want to stay. I know where my boundary is and I stay there. Okay, based on how you feel the next day indicates where that boundary was to some extent. That was just an easiest example. Let's take that within the context of just everyday life. If I'm enjoying something and it's good, it usually takes some experience to understand where that boundary is, to where it isn't enjoyable, it isn't pleasurable, it isn't desirable, because I've crossed a boundary. What I'm wanting to communicate is that the feeling is not the boundary. The feeling is an indicator of how close you or somebody else is to the boundary. And then the next level is being able to process the feeling, to work through the feeling, to figure out what's going on that's giving you that feeling. How can we stop that without crossing somebody else's boundary or your own? Because remember, we talked about when you cross that boundary, oftentimes there's consequences to crossing that boundary. And I just used wine as the way to communicate going too far. Good morning, Jenny. Angela. Hello, my beautiful friend. So speaking your feelings and boundaries or wine? What's your language, girl? Tell me. I'm pretty sure it's the feelings and the boundaries. I know it is, but I'm just wondering if wine's in there a little bit too. So it's just really important. And here's where your life can change, to get back on track. So here's where your life can change. When you understand that boundaries exist, they have a purpose, They are there for a reason. When you understand that, God, alone can be life-changing. If you've had a life where boundaries were not clear, they were not communicated, and you felt like you just kept hitting your head on the wall over and over, the wall was a boundary, and maybe it was never communicated to you except through consequences. That's the first part. The second part is knowing and understanding how to process the feeling so that you stay within your own boundary and you do not cross somebody else's boundary. Those are two different things. And the biggest thing that helps with understanding boundaries and processing feelings is having somebody to walk alongside of you, guiding you, helping you, listening to you, and bringing you back to remind you and to show you that the purpose of the boundary is for everybody's health and well-being. They exist to keep people safe. They exist to keep good things in and bad things out. And if you've never understood that about boundaries, you probably cross them often, and the result of that is consequences in your life. But having somebody to walk alongside and help you understand where the boundaries are will change your life. It changed my life. I had two mentors who would sit with me, who would listen with me, who would walk me through what I was feeling, where it came from, where I crossed a line, without judgment, without shame, and without condemnation. Their whole intention was to help me know where those boundaries were so that I could thrive. How do they know this? Because they crossed the same boundaries. They went over the line. They had similar consequences. And or you watch somebody else cross the boundary, cross the line, and you realize there's a boundary. I'm not crossing it. There's something there. I'm going to respect that boundary because I want to thrive. You come up against gravity all by yourself, you lose. Some boundaries are that strong. You cross them once, you lose. So, and the topic of boundaries too, yes. So, understanding this changes your life. It frees you up. One, it helps mitigate consequences in your life, right? And when you understand that boundaries need to be respected, can be respected, you can work with them to get to higher levels, which is exactly what we do when we fly. Pilots in physics, I'm just talking about boundaries in general. Like the general idea of a boundary is to keep good things in and bad things out. General idea of a boundary. And that they exist, and oftentimes we don't set the boundary. The boundary is already preset. For an example, gravity, right? Having said that, when you understand the boundary, the law, the constant that you did not set and you cannot change, when you work with it, you are able to go to new heights. You're able to go to new levels. This is flying. This is physics. This is the law of lift, right? Always taking into consideration gravity. Always, because gravity will win. Boundaries that you did not set, that you cannot change, when you come up against them, they will win. You will lose. Knowing that helps you figure out where the boundaries are so that you can rise. Do not ignore the boundary. Do not ignore the indicator of the boundary, which is your feeling. Keep both of them ever present before you so that you may use them to rise higher, to go to another level, to have a higher quality of life, richer relationships, more meaningful conversations. You can go deep when you know where the boundary is. You can go really, really deep. You can go really, really high when you know where the boundary is. Very full, very enriching life comes from understanding, knowing, respecting boundaries and their indicators, which are your feelings, that are there to show you how close you or somebody else is to a boundary. And then knowing how to work through those feelings and process those feelings without crossing your boundary or the other person. Gold. Gold. That deserves all the glitter emojis that could ever exist. In my opinion, all of the glitter emojis right there, right? Using the wisdom to understand how they work together and why they exist is what gives you a thriving life where you are free to go as high as you want to go because you understand where they are and you understand why they're there and you play within them. So, those are my thoughts on boundaries and feelings today. Oh, the glitter emojis! Angela's speaking my love language with all the glitter emojis. I love them so much. Okay, so I don't know what time it is. I don't know how long we've been here together. But if you have any thoughts or comments or questions, please ask or say something. I love to respond to those. I love to respond to questions. It gives me, it just opens up and unlocks all the little things in my brain that I haven't thought of in a while, and I get really, really excited. So I love questions. I like comments. I love discussion. I love discussion where people come together to talk, to communicate, to understand. All the warm hearts, all the warm white hearts for that one. That's what good, healthy discussions do for me. And I think they are foundational important to anybody's life. Okay, so that's all I have for you today. I'll come back here if anybody posts any questions or comments in the replay. If you're going to watch this on the replay, then just let me know that you're here so I can be sure to check. Have a fantastic afternoon, and I will see you next week.